Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this fine world. You are listening to the Startup Selling Show, talking sales with Scott Sabucci. That's me. Today's episode is I don't know, maybe a special episode. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. So I'll just give you the gist of it, just so you know what's ahead. And that way you can know what to be ready for. So here's the gist of it. For many of you who know me, one of the things that I do outside of work is ultra running, endurance running. So I just recently finished a 100-mile race in Bryce Canyon down in southern Utah. And one of the things that I think is really important for me to do as I'm doing these races is to bring back lessons learned and how they relate to running a startup. And I think there are many, many analogies, many, many anecdotes that I take from running out on the trail. And what I did with this episode is spend some time with Steven Anderson, just kind of doing a download, a briefing of the race itself. And he and I spoke for quite a bit and just wove in to the tapestry of the conversation some of the lessons learned about, not just the story about the race and kind of what I went through over 30 hours out on the trail, but also thinking about like how do some of the things that I faced out in Bryce Canyon, how do they relate to the startup, like running a startup? Because I think there's lots and lots of lessons learned. So he and I spoke for a while, and then after we actually both had a hard stop because we had a couple of client calls after we had set aside time to do this recording. And so there was a couple of other lessons, a couple of other thoughts that I wanted to share I didn't get a chance to do. So I did a personal postscript to the conversation with Steven that you'll get to after he and I chat for a bit. And so the additional lessons learned. So it's a bit of a longer episode than normal. And I don't know, I guess it's kind of like a special edition because I do always want to help you understand, like as a startup founder, as an entrepreneur, there's so many difficult obstacles for you, as you know, along the way on your journey. And, I always think of the work that we do with clients and the work that you're doing every single day as the hero's journey. If you're familiar with the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, this idea that, you receive the call, as they say, and you decide, okay, I'm going to take action. I've got this idea for a company and I want to make an impact. I want to solve this problem in the world. I want to solve this problem for this industry. And you embark on this journey along the way and you hit obstacles, you hit obstructions, you hit challenges along the way, and you have to figure a way around them and through them and sometimes over them and under them, and maybe just take the side paths to get from where you are to where you want to go. And it's really, really hard. And that in a lot of ways feels like what I do when I'm doing these ultra marathons. It's, in this case, it's 100 miles. And, you start the race with excitement and you do a lot of work and a lot of preparation to get to the point, just to get to the starting line. And then you cross the starting line and off you go. You're on this journey. And so as I'm, out there on the trail, on my own personal hero's journey in some respects on that trail, because I hit obstacles and obstructions and challenges along the way that I've got to think through and work myself through. There are also, part of being on that hero's journey is that you are going to succeed. And when you succeed, you bring back the prize to your tribe of people. And in a lot of ways, I guess I feel like the prize that I bring back when I go on this journey, when I do these ultra marathons, is the lessons learned, the knowledge that we can use and leverage for you with your startup. And so maybe it's a little bit indulgent or self-aggrandizing to feel like there's parallels here. I just feel pretty strongly about this. This is who I am as a person, and these are the things that I do. And I think they're just, for me personally, as I'm out there on the trail and I'm out here every day running my own business, there are really hard things that I have to deal with every single day. And a lot of times I use personally the lessons that I learn about being out there on the trail and relate those to how I run my own company and overcome my own challenges and obstacles. And if it works for me, I have to believe that there's some of you out there that would also translate to as well. And that's why we decided to do this kind of special edition of the Startup Selling Show. So I guess we'll call it the Bryce Canyon Race Report Edition and Lessons in Startup Selling. So that's the episode that's ahead. So you'll hear a conversation with Stephen and me for a bit, and then you'll hear a postscript, sort of like a part two of this particular episode. A couple quick asks of you. If you've been a listener to the Startup Selling Show, thank you very much. If you would, please leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast. And then also, I'd love it if you could share this episode with a friend or 10. And maybe not this episode, whatever episode you feel like would be useful for them. The best way for us to get the word out about this podcast is viral. And that means you taking a moment to text a friend, shoot an email to people, tell somebody when you get to the office, like, hey man, I've listened to this really great podcast called The Startup Selling Show. You should check it out. We'd really appreciate it because, we see the subscribers going up, the listenership going up every single month. We had our single biggest month last month in April of 2019, and we hit some big milestones there and brought a big smile to everyone's face because we put a lot of time and effort into producing this show, and nothing jazzes us more than seeing that people are seeing the benefits and listening to the show. So that's it for now. Without any further ado, let's get over to my conversation with Stephen Anderson, and we'll call this the Bryce Canyon Race Report / Startup Lessons Learned. Okay, talk to you soon.
Dude, where should I start? You ask the questions, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Where should you start? How about so you've been gone for a couple of days. You had to drive to your race, and you had to pick up an RV with your whole family. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. So I suppose the first place would be mindset, right? So you have all these tasks that you need to do before you can even go to the race. And you ran, 100 miles?
Well, it was 101.6.
Oh, okay.
Just to be, not that it matters, but it matters. It was 101.6. Yeah, so it was officially a 100-miler. And the race was down in Bryce Canyon, which, if you don't know, it's in southern Utah. It's not actually in the national park. It's right next to the national park. The attractiveness of this race for me was a couple of things. One is the family stuff that you alluded to. Last year, I did a race in Zion, near Zion National Park, 100-miler. And we did an RV trip, and it was just awesome. We'd never really done like the RV camping thing. And so we had such a good time that we decided to do the Bryce race this year. So that was it. First of all, just because then after the race, you'd be able to hang out and hike around Bryce Canyon and go back to Zion. The second thing is that it's in the ultra running world, there's one race called the Western States. Some people have heard of it. It's a more commonly known ultra run. In order to get into the Western States, a lottery. And in order to get in the lottery, you have to run a qualifying race. So once you run a qualifying race, then you get a ticket into the lottery. And every year you get more tickets. So last year I only had one ticket in the lottery, so I had like a 1 in 2,000 chance. This year, now that I've qualified, I get 2 tickets in the lottery. So, yeah, exactly.
When did you find out that you got 2 tickets? How long ago?
Well, it's just part of the Western States process. So every year that you qualify, you get double the tickets. So basically, the way they do it is there's such a big list of people that want to get into this race that they stack it up. So as long as you continue to qualify, eventually your name will get drawn. Not always though, because this year I went to the actual lottery drawing in Auburn, California, and there are people that have now been in their 7th year of qualifying. So they had, I don't know, however many tickets, and their probability of getting picked was something like, I don't know, 15, 20% just for this particular lottery. And that, add that up over years, and they still didn't make it. So there's no guarantee. Not that the lottery drawing is back in December, I think.
Okay. So you knew that this was coming out from December.
Oh yeah. So whenever I do my race schedule for the year, I look at, okay, what's a race I can do that will qualify me for Western States. And the other thing I look for, there's a second big race that's in Europe called the UTMB, which is an ultra trail running. It's a 100-mile race around Mont Blanc in Switzerland. So you actually go through Italy, Switzerland, and France in this race. And to get into that race, you have to earn points. And so certain races are worth certain numbers of points. And so this race was worth 5 points. I'm doing the Tahoe 200 later this year, which is worth 6 points. And so those 2 aggregate points give me enough points to get into that lottery. And so last year I was in the lottery for that race, but I did not get picked this year. I'll have twice as many tickets. So my probability goes up to like 60%. Just fewer people for more spots. So it's a little bit easier to get into that race. So I'm very calculated about the races that I do because I want them to be family fun, and I want them to be Western States qualifiers, and I want them to be UTMB qualifiers. Not to mention the fact that I'm trying to run a business and be a dad and be a husband. So
just side projects.
Yeah, all the side projects around the running that I'm doing. So yeah, so that was the race. So this is the Bryce Canyon 100. Yeah, so that's a little bit of the backdrop.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's a good backdrop. So like, talk to me. December, you knew you were going to do it. You plan out your race schedule. It's May now, and you're about to go on this race. What did it take to get you trained up and ready to do it? Was the training successful when you were running? Did you feel like? Then I want to get to like lessons that you learned while you were running.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. The punchline of the whole thing is the training that I did was remarkably effective for me. So I take a I won't say it's not as alternative of an approach as it used to be. 10 years ago, this would have been considered very alternative, but now there's more and more people doing it, but still fewer people. And what I mean by that is that I do a lot of high intensity, lower mileage training. So I incorporate a lot of weightlifting and CrossFit and high intensity, high heart rate stuff. Where typically when you do endurance racing, whether it's triathlons or ultra running or even marathons, I say even marathons, it's 26 miles. People tend to follow this idea, well, you just have to put in the miles. You have to put in the miles. You have to put in the miles. And it's called long, slow distance. So you just run a lot of miles really slow and you build up this endurance engine so that you can run a really long way. And so there are some ultra runners, like the people that I know, that are regularly logging 50, 60, 70 hour weeks. Like that's a normal week for them. So it's averaging, 8 to 10 miles per day. One, I don't have the time for that. And two, my body just can't handle running that much. I'll get knee problems, or my feet will start to hurt, or it just doesn't feel right. And so a couple of years ago, I switched over to this CrossFit endurance training style. And so I'm still running. I'll run anywhere between 30 and 40 miles a week. And then I'll do, like I said, weightlifting, everything from deadlifts to box jumps to like all out sprints. So I'll do repeats on hills, or I do a 2-mile time trial around my neighborhood every Sunday morning after I do some weightlifting. And that helps to strengthen your ligaments and tendons. So my philosophy on running these races isn't so much, how do I train in order to run 100 miles? My philosophy is, how do I construct my body composition so that I can withstand 100 miles? Because it just beats you up. It's just constant, right? You're out there for, in my case, 30 hours. And you're just moving for 30 hours without sleep. And so once the endurance engine is sort of built, now it's just a matter of making sure that your body doesn't break down. And I finished that race while I was physically tired. I could have kept going. Like I was experiencing no problems, no muscular problems, no knee problems, no tendon problems, no ligament problems. I didn't even get a blister on my foot. I didn't get a single blister. I know. So I've been working really hard. It doesn't mean that the training is any easier because I'm doing fewer miles. I would argue in some cases it's even harder because I'm putting myself into 170 beats per minute heart rate range in some cases. It's just like really hard stuff. But that's the training philosophy, and that's what I've been doing for the last few months to get ready for this race.
Wow.
Physically.
So
anyway.
Before you got to the race, you had to drive how far?
Yeah, so we rented an RV from Sacramento. I live, in Davis, and so we drove. And this is actually kind of an ironic part. So we drove across over US 80, dropped in over past Tahoe into Reno, and then you pick up US Route 50, which kind of cuts across catty corner across Nevada down into southern Utah. And my wife and I didn't know this at the time, but on Google Maps when we were following the route, we were in the middle of Nevada. I think it's Nevada. I know people pronounce it different ways. On Google Maps, all of a sudden I saw it said the loneliest road on America, or in America. And I was laughing. I'm like, oh my gosh, this really is America's loneliest road. And that's what it's known as. And so in this expanse of US 50, there is more nothing than anything I've ever seen. You're just driving for miles and miles, and sometimes you'd see a car and sometimes you wouldn't. We did see 2 antelope that we almost like cut across us. It was like, we were joking because I was saying like, this is the way the race is going to feel, because it took so long to get there. There was this massive winds. So the wind was this crosswind. So we could only drive like 55 miles an hour. And the speed limit was like 70, 75. So Google Maps is telling us like, oh, you're only 8 miles from your destination, but instead we were actually more like 12. Yeah. So we ended up having to break the trip into 2 days. We thought it was going to take us like 12 or 13 hours. It ended up taking us like 16 or 17 to drive there. But we were in an RV. So we found an RV park and we parked for the night and got some rest and did the rest of the drive, and then got there the day before the race.
Okay. So you have a day before to prep and just get yourself mentally, you do a little bit of running as well when you got there?
No, I shut down everything a week ago.
Stretching?
Yeah, so we arrived. Some stretching, not as much as I should have. I told myself I was going to stretch a lot, but I didn't. Mostly just, we got to the campsite. So a lot of people just camp right there at the starting line, because it started at this place called Proctor Canyon, and they got permission to let people park and camp there. So we pulled in around 2 p.m, checked in, got my race bib, did the pre-race briefing, and then back to the RV for dinner, and then got to bed around 9 o'clock. And the alarm went off at 3:45 in the morning because the race starts at 5. So
now you're running.
Not much time. Now I'm running or walking.
Yeah. So what is it? How do you start like 100 miles? How does one even begin to pace themselves for that with elevation change, terrain change, potential weather? Like, are you eating when you're doing this? Are you like,
oh yeah.
Like what does that all look like? Like, how do you know how to approach something that monumental?
Yeah. So the trick to these races is to start off really slow and then slow down from there. So this is definitely the tortoise and the hare kind of thing. Like you can't just like gun it, and because like even if you like go really fast for the first 20 miles, you have to think about your fuel, like your body's fuel and like your muscular endurance. And so like if you go out too fast and you burn out, then it's really, really hard to recover. It's always better to have gas in the tank. So in this case, the first roughly 8 to 9 miles is mostly uphill. So we were starting about 7,500 feet. So that was the other thing too. The altitude I've done a race up in Tahoe where we got to 9,500 feet, and it definitely, the air was thin. And I was feeling it. We ended up in the first climb, you get up to like 8,900 according to my Garmin. So by the time you get to like 8,800, I was feeling the altitude. I was getting a little bit of a headache getting up. There's an aid station up at like just before mile 9. So you basically go from 3,500 to almost 9,000 feet, then you drop back down and then you go back up. And so the first 9 miles though, they click by pretty quickly. I mean, it's like kind of exciting. You're like, okay, the race has started. There's a lot of people around you because everybody starts at once. There's there's like 100 or so people. So you end up forming these little packs, and everybody's talking and happy and jovial, like, oh, we're doing this race. And you just engage in conversations, and the miles go pretty quickly. So you make a couple quick trail friends, and then you're like, okay, great. We made it to the first aid station and everything's great. And then the next stretch from mile 9 to 18 was mostly like this long rolling downhill. And so that's a place where you kind of get rewarded for the 8-9 miles up. Now you get like 8 or 9 miles. So mostly down. It's pretty runnable. But when I say runnable, like if I'm just out training, I'll be running 7.5 to 8 minute miles. Runnable, even downhill here, means I'm doing like 10 minute miles or 11 minute miles just to keep, you just want to sort of not burn out. Because if you do the math, you're like, okay, so even in this 10-mile stretch, if I run 9-minute miles versus 11-minute miles, it's only a marginal difference of 2 minutes per mile. Over 10 miles, 20 minutes. Like you can be out there for 30 hours. Like what's 20 minutes? But it's important to remember these things. And that's one of the things I think, like just to bring in maybe a couple of some of the lessons, like that in itself, like doing those kinds of calculations and thinking about like, this is a long journey. Like you're signing up for 100 miles. It's like you're starting a business, right? you start at the starting line and all these people around you and everybody's celebrating and you're like, yeah, we're doing great. And it's easy to get lost in the pack. And you're like, oh, well, those people are running really fast. Like I saw some people that were running up the first hill because it was a gradual upgrade the first couple miles. And I'm looking at my Garmin. I'm like, I'm doing like 13-minute miles. I'm good. Like even that feels fast going up a hill. I should be doing like 14, 15-minute miles. And I'm trying to slow myself down. And so it's easy to get caught up in this wave of excitement. And then if you push too hard too soon, you burn yourself out. And I think a lot of people, you're starting a company, can feel the same way, where you get caught up in this excitement and you push. And then you're trying to like build the billion-dollar company in a couple months or even a couple of years. And you realize like, man, this is actually going to take a while. And so I think it's a really important reminder to have that self-governor and not look at people around you and worry what that person's doing and this person's doing, because the people in these races, you just never know who they are. You just never know who they are. Like I ran the first couple miles with this woman, Julie, who we just chatted. It was one of my trail friends I made out there. We chatted for a couple miles, and she's done some long distance stuff in the past. And it turns out later on at the finish line, I came in at 30 hours, and she's sitting in a lounge chair, showered, clean. I barely recognized her. She's like, "Oh, hey, Scott." And I was like, "Julie?" She's like, "Yeah." Like, "Yeah, good to see you." Right. And so in the start of the race, we're running together. And in fact, I even went up ahead of her a little bit. Turns out I checked her time, and she finished ahead of me by 3 hours and was the overall women's winner. Like, she won the women's bracket. So you're like, oh, it's just some woman, Like, no, it turns out like she is an elite woman who won the race. So, you see people that like, oh, that person shouldn't be ahead of me. But if they are, you don't know. Maybe they are going too fast, or maybe they're having a great day. Or maybe just because their body shape is one that you don't think that they should be running faster than you, doesn't make a lick of difference. So you just got to focus and run your own race.
Run your race. Entrepreneurs and runners, run your race.
Yeah, run your own race.
What would you say was the most challenging part of this race?
Yeah, so maybe just kind of thinking about this from a progression standpoint. So you have the first aid station, everybody, like, okay, cool, we made it to the first aid station, euphoric moment, checkpoint, past the big climb. Now you got 10 miles of downhill, make some good progress, make up some time on the downhill. The next stretch is also pretty flat, a little bit gradual uphill. We went to this aid station that would get you to mile 25 at a place called Coyote Hollow. Now this particular course was a two loop course. So we're going to do 50.6 miles twice. It wasn't originally set up that way. There was a different course they'd set up, but because they had gotten so much snow this year, parts of the course they had planned was still covered in snow because it was just in the elevations. And the U.S. Forestry Service said you're not allowed on the trail. So as a backup plan, they had this 2-loop course. So now, like in mindset wise, I'm like, okay, well, if I get to mile 25, I'm halfway done the first loop, which is then like a quarter of the way down the race. So it's kind of like a nice checkpoint. And so in a weird way, you're like, oh, this is great. I'm a quarter of the way down the race. And you feel like you're making progress. But the thing you have to remember is like, it's 25 miles. I've just basically run a marathon in elevation with climbing. And so it doesn't matter how good a shape you're in, you're going to start to feel it. So like mindset wise, you're like, oh, we're only a quarter way through the race. You sort of like try to tell yourself like, oh, we've only gone 25 miles. It's like, no, you've gone 25 miles. And so that next stretch, the next couple stretches from mile 25 to 33, there were a lot of what are called switchbacks. So the way that the terrain is set up is like these natural, like if you're looking down from the sky down to like in satellite, it almost looked like fingers, and you had to go back and forth along these fingers. And so you go down one and then climb back up 100 feet down, and then you go down another 100 feet and go back up. So your total elevation was not really changing, but you're just going up and down, up and down, up and down. And that was for about 3 miles of that. And you didn't know when the switchbacks were going to end. I knew there were switchbacks because the course briefing, I talked to this guy. He's like, yeah, this area's got a lot of switchbacks, and it seems like it goes on forever. I'm like, yeah, because it does. So, and then after you get done the switchbacks, you got another 4 or 5 miles to the next aid station. But the cool part about this section is this is where it really started to feel like Bryce Canyon. If you're not familiar with Bryce Canyon, it's kind of known for what they call these hoodoos, which are these huge orange rock formations that are all kind of rounded and they almost look like statues. like later on in the race, they became faces as I started hallucinating.
Oh.
Yeah. But they look pretty cool. You can see what's that?
When does the hallucination stuff start?
In the middle of the night. Yeah, we'll get to that part.
Wait, so quick question here. Yeah. So we're about to head to mile 33, right? That's where we are right now, 25 to 33?
Yep.
How many hours have passed now since you've started?
So I'm about 8 hours in, roughly 8 hours.
Okay.
8 to 9 hours.
So you're like,
that's about right.
Early afternoon right now.
Yeah, you're like, so that's the other wacky thing. Like you're like, oh, I'm coming up to aid station mile 33, and you look at your watch and it's like around noon. I don't know, it's like 11 or noon. You're like, damn, it's like not even lunchtime. I've covered 33 miles because you start at 5 in the morning. So in that sense, you feel like, wow, this is really great. I've covered a lot of ground and it's not even lunchtime. Then the other thing is like the cold reality of it is, yeah, but I still got 18 hours to go. Right? Like I'm still going to be running through the rest of the day into the evening, and then I'm going to put my headlamp on, and then I'm going to run with my headlamp until it's dawn, and then I'm going to be still running. And like, so on the one hand, you do, I think this is like another lesson too, where I think it's important to segment and like pick your goals and say like, we call it station to station when you're running these races. Like think about, okay, the next aid station, it's 8 miles. Don't try to run the next 67 miles, just run the next 8 or the next 5 or the next 9. And just get station to station. And so segmenting the course. And I think it's the same way with, again, like parallels to startups. It's just like, don't worry about the minutia of every minute or every mile. I used to get this really bad habit where I'd check my Garmin a lot. Like I'd be running for what I thought was a while. And I go, oh man, I really knocked out a lot of distance there. And I check my Garmin and I realized I only ran like 0.42 miles. It's like nothing. You're like, that can't be right because I've gone from here to down and up and around, and you just realize the distances are different, especially when you're going up. You're going up, but they measure distance horizontally. So you're like, yeah, you're like running the hypotenuse, but you're it actually is longer distance, but it's not in a weird way. So I created a new habit for myself, which I practice this in my training, which is instead of setting my Garmin to distance, I set it to time of day. So I'm just looking at my clock, and then this other field I look at is my total, like my actual elevation. So I knew the course well enough to say like, okay, I know there's a big climb up here, and at the top of that climb, it's at roughly 8,800 feet. So that's how I can measure how close I was to the next peak. I just look at elevation, not distance. And that really reduced the amount of time that I was just checking my watch. And then the other thing, which became really important at night, just picking times and saying, okay, the next aid station is 8 miles away. I want to get there by 4:30 in the morning. And that's the only thing that matters. And it really helped me to reduce this anxiety of worried about time and distance. I'm just going to keep moving. As long as I keep moving, I know I'm going to get to the next place. And if I get there before 4:30, that's great. If I get there at 4:30, that's my goal. If I get there a little past, that's fine too. But it really helped me to reduce the anxiety of like every step or every minute, or like, am I on pace? Am I going fast enough? How much ground did I cover? And I think that's really important, again, from a startup standpoint. Like pick your one thing that you really got to focus on to get you the next place in your business, and just focus on that. Don't worry so much about the day to day, because if you're constantly trying to like shift around minute to minute, mile to mile, you can make yourself crazy. Okay, so now we're at mile 33, and then we have to run what's called the Red Canyon Loop. So Red Canyon is just that. It's a canyon of red rocks all around you. They call it a canyon because you start in the canyon, but then you have to climb out of the canyon. And so this part is like another big climb. And then this part of the elevation profile I got wrong. I thought it was just one big climb up and then one descent back to the same aid station. It's like a 5 mile loop. So I thought, we'll just climb up, turn around, and then kind of work our way back. But it turns out you climb up and go down, and then you climb up again, and then you go down, and then you climb up again, and then you go down, and then you're like, oh, now I'm done, and there's like one more little climb. So you're like, damn, like this little 5 mile loop ended up taking me like close to 2 hours because you're just climbing and it's really steep. The first time I did this loop, actually looking at my times here. Yeah, so the first time around this loop is 1 hour and 52 minutes to go 5 miles.
You have to, this is like, is it steep enough to where you need to climb with your hands too?
No, you don't. There were a couple of spots where so that's the other thing we didn't talk about, the conditions. So I was in the desert, and normally, like when you think of the desert, Stephen, what are some things that come to mind?
Hot. Super hot. Beating
hot,
down stuff.
dry.
Very dry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dang.
We got some freaking snow. We got snow and rain. Like I'm going to Bryce Canyon expecting to be running in like 80-degree weather. 70 to 80-degree weather is the climate there, according to the U.S. Weather Service over time. We get there and it's freaking snowing. So I'm going around Red Canyon in the middle of the afternoon and it starts snowing. So it makes and it had been raining for like a week. So all of these trails were like this, they became this cakey mess. So it was like red clay. And so it would stick to your feet. And some parts of it were kind of slick. So you have to be careful. I use trekking poles so I get some good traction. And again, because I do some weightlifting and stuff, I have some pretty decent upper body strength. So it helped me to pull myself up and keep myself from sliding down. You can kind of use them as a way to arrest your fall as you're kind of going down the hill. So it wasn't too bad where I had to do all fours, but there's definitely some steep spots where you're just climbing stairs, basically. So yeah, we do the Red Canyon Loop in the snow and get back to the aid station. Sorry, you were about to ask a question.
Dan, was that just complete surprise? You're dressed for 80-degree weather, temperature drops, and then it's snowing?
Well, I mean, I'd been watching the weather for a week, so I knew it was supposed to be cold. Like the highs were 48, which at night it got down to like in the 20s, which is another thing we can talk about. So I do the Red Canyon Loop, get back mile 38, and now everything here is like, okay, so now I've only got a half marathon to get to the start finish line to finish the first loop. So again, like that's just the mindset. You're like, okay, I've only got a half marathon. So you're trying to segment and break it down and not make it seem like that big a deal. So the next section was a bit of a climb, not terrible, but seemed to go on forever. It was like 5 or 6 miles to the next aid station. And then the last segment from mile 43, I think, to mile 50 had a massive freaking climb. Like we had to go again from like 7,200 feet back up to 8,500, drop back down to like under 8,000, then back up to like 8,500 or 8,300. And then you had like 3 miles downhill to the start finish. So this is the part where you have to really be careful with your brain. And I'll compare this again to the startup thing, because you want to quit. It's like the easiest thing to do. You're like, okay, like what exactly am I trying to accomplish here? Like, why am I out here? Like, really? I was actually making pretty good time. I had expected the first loop. I had 3 race plans. I had a 24-hour plan, a 27-hour plan, and a 30-hour plan. And my 24-hour plan, I knew at this point, I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that, because the trail was too technical and the elevation, while it wasn't like a lot of climbing, it was the climbing that there was pretty steep, so it just slowed you down. But I was like, I think I could still knock this out in under 27, which was kind of my initial goal going into this race. But I'm coming into the end of the first loop, and I'm at mile 38, 39, 40, I leave the Red Canyon aid station. I'm like, only 13 miles to go. But I'm just like, this kind of sucks, man. Like, I've been out here for a while. I'm like I'm an hour behind my 24-hour pace, which is no big deal. Easiest thing to do is just get back to the start finish where my wife and son are and be like, all right, I think I'm good. I just ran 50 miles. I could be proud of that. And those are the voices, right? Your muscles you're like, even though my body held up really well, I was still feeling like you're tired, right? And that's where you have to use your race experience and say, no, this is normal. Like, it's normal to want to quit, and it's okay. And I think this is really important as an entrepreneur. Like, there are times you want to quit, and that's totally normal. If you're not feeling that way, I would say that there's something wrong with you. I think it's like, it's supposed to feel that way. This is what you signed up for. I signed up for this. And that's like, when people say, why do you do these races? I think one of the main reasons I do this is I want to see how far I can push myself. So I chose this. And so, yeah, like for me, I was like, no. Yes, I want to quit, and that's good. that's exactly where I want to be. I wanted to be in this place. That's why I signed up for the race, to get here and then push through it. Because when I did like the evaluation and just, like you would like a checklist, I'm like, okay, water's good. I'm peeing on a regular basis like you're supposed to. I'm staying hydrated, getting enough calories. I don't feel hungry, eating as I go. Body, like, yeah, my muscles are sore, but I'm not worsening, right? I'm just like steady state. I've been feeling bad since mile 25. It's now mile 42. I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, of course you're tired, right? So this is the thing. So if you want to know what you're made of, then you have to push through that, because the voices want you to quit because it's a survival thing. Your brain is like, no, like, don't go longer because you like take a break, stop here. But that's where the training comes in, both my mental training and physical training. Say, no, I can actually push through this. I can push way through this, because getting back, the other thing is, which I told myself in the first loop, I got to mile like 18 aid station. And at that point, I thought to myself, the midpoint is not mile 50. Like you do a loop and you get to mile 50. The midpoint is not mile 50. The midpoint is actually like mile 68 or 75. That's the midpoint of the race, like mindset wise. Not just getting, because the effort that's, because the first loop. And so just like being aware of this, and that's where experience comes in, where I've done these races enough times, or I'm like, no, there's no reason to quit. I've got the plan in place. Nutrition's good. Hydration's good. Physically, I'm good. Just keep going.
I kind of like that too, because the race is supposed to be 100 miles. And then, like, I've done this before when I was training for athletics, where like I'd have to do like 6 circuits. I just mentally say, no, like I'm planning on 8. Just like halfway is 4, it's like 4. When I get to 4, it's like, all right, look, the end is close. And then, I trick myself and then I'd be done at 6. Or I would just be like,
right,
oh, I'm going to do 8, because let's do 8.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it works.
I do that all the time when I'm lifting or doing CrossFit sets, or if I'm doing kettlebell swings or whatever it is. I'll do the same thing. I'm like, okay, like this last set, I'll do 4 sets of 25, and this last set, I'm going to do 31, because 3.1 miles is or 31 miles is a 50K. So it's kind of like this number going like, oh, I'm going to do extra 6, and then I get to 31. I'm like, screw it, I'm just going to do 50 in this last set.
Just get it
and
done.
That's the thing. Like I do that all the time when I'm training. If I'm like, I think about if I'm doing 100 sit-ups, or if I'm doing 5 sets of 10 pull-ups, then even the last set I might have to do like a set of 5, and then 3, and then 2, and then 1, and I do the 10, and I'll take like a 30-second break. I'm going to do 2 more, and just add those extra couple percent. And I think about that additively, like if I'm training 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and you're doing an extra 1 to 2 or 5% every time, that's like, 1, mindset wise, it teaches you to push past where you think you can go. And 2, it's just physically, you're going to be a little bit stronger. It adds up. So, but by the time I got over that last climb in the first loop and it was headed the way down, my mindset was back. I'm like, no. I'm like, the thing is to tell yourself, don't like the thing I told myself was, don't think about the rest stop. Think about getting through the rest stop. Like I knew I was going to see my wife and son. I was going to get there around 6 o'clock, 13 hours for the first loop. I thought if I had an excellent race, I could get there in 12 or a little under 12. But like I said, I didn't think that I was there and the course would allow me to do that. But I'm like, 13 hours is still good. Because now I'm like, okay, if I do a 13-hour first loop, 14-hour second loop, I tend to get stronger as I go at these races, just historically looking at my times and splits. So like I can still do 27 hours. And even if I do 28, it's still a great freaking race, right? Especially given the conditions. So as I was coming down that 3-mile descent to get back to the start finish, I was already thinking about how little time can I spend at the turn so that I can get back out. So it's just like keeping yourself going, like take a break, but don't stop. And this is something else that I wrote. Like there's a difference between taking a break and stopping, because I saw people stopping, and there was 108 people that signed up for this race. And I looked at the final results. There were 55 DNFs by my count. So over half the field did not finish. That's pretty high.
It's even higher.
Pretty high for yeah. But I suspect, I don't know, some of those DNFs could have been injuries. Some of those people could be just not trained enough. But I know that there's a certain percentage of those DNFs because I've been one of them myself. Like we've done a podcast where I DNF'd a race back in August, and I DNF'd not because I was physically unable to go, because I was mentally unable to go. And so that's where I think like having a good plan and just knowing mindset wise, it's not about getting to the halfway point and stopping. Like, this is a break. I'm going to reset. I got there, changed my shoes, cleaned off my feet, repacked my backpack. My wife was there. It was a nice little lift. My son could care less that I was there. He was annoyed because I was there and he couldn't play with his friends. He's like, "Come on, Daddy, get it back out on the course so I can go play with my friends and roast marshmallows." So I was like, it was good. I was like, okay, I gotta go. And so I ended up spending like 20, 25 minutes at that aid station or at that break point, but which is it was a pretty long time, but it was a lot faster than it could have been because I was like, I gotta go. So we get out and we go to loop 2.
How long is your typical stop at a aid station?
If it's just like an aid station along the way, I try to keep it to 3 to 5 minutes. So as coming into the aid station, once I know it's coming, you can usually see them like a quarter mile away because there would be big tents, or you can hear them. You can hear people talking or music at night. They play music, so you can hear it. As I'm coming into the aid station, I start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do in what order? So I kind of have this order of operations that I follow now, which is first thing I want to do is refill my water bottles with nutrition and food, like get that done so I'm not dilly-dallying around. Secondly, try to get some food in me, so eat some potatoes or whatever food they have available. They usually have lots of like sugary candy food, which I don't like to eat until I have to. So I usually eat potatoes, or sometimes I had bacon or grill up some quesadillas or something and just try to shove some real food in my stomach. And then, some aid stations I don't even sit. I stand the whole time, get my stuff filled, and then just go. So I'm checking my watch as I go in. I go, okay, it's 3:32. I'm going to be back on the trail by 3:37. And just doing that, going into these aid stations, really helps me to be a lot more swift through them. So I'm not, because it does add up. If there's 8 aid stations, 2 loops, that's 40 minutes. An extra 5 minutes is 40 minutes per loop. Do that twice. Now you're looking at like an hour plus on your time. It's like, I want to get done as fast as I can.
Do you talk to people when you're making those rest stops, or you're just like, leave me the fuck alone?
Yeah. No. I actually make it a point to be really grateful, and like I'll try to crack some jokes because it's a way for me to tell myself like things are not that bad. I'm just out here chilling. So the aid stations, like most of them are manned by volunteers, and most of them are manned by volunteers who are really good. Like they'll like, hey, what do you need? Can I fill that for you? So I'll take out I use this drink called Tailwind. It's in these little packets, and I'll take it out of my back. I'll have it in my hand as I'm coming into the aid station. I'm like, hey, do you want me to fill that for you? And I just hand them my water bottle and my packet, and they'll do it for you and bring it back. But they'll do what you ask them to do, but you need to tell them what you want. Yeah. And that's the thing I've learned. And that's why I do this order of operations coming in. Like, no, when I walk in, if I just ask them on, like when they ask, I'm like, yeah, could you please fill this up? Put it in there, fill it up with water. And then they'll hand it back to me, and then the bottles are full. And if they say, hey, do you want anything to eat? I'm thinking ahead of time, like, do you have any potatoes or quesadillas? Yes, they're right over here. Cool. And then I shove a couple down my throat. So that really helps to keep things moving. And then I always thank the volunteers, like individually, like, oh man, thanks for filling up those bottles. I really appreciate it. And then as I'm leaving the aid station, I always make it a point to turn around and just like announce to everyone, thank you, everyone, volunteers. I really appreciate it. And most people are like me, where they'll do the same. But it makes you feel good. It makes them feel good. I've been an aid station volunteer, and it's a lot of hard work. And they're out there too for longer than I'm out there. So that helps, I think, your mindset a lot as well.
Comparing this to other races we've talked about, none of them in this depth, but it definitely seems like you had a very clear, like, this is what I want to accomplish. This is how I'm breaking down the training.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to this.
Really, yeah. Because so the DNF that I took in August was a big lesson. I got soft on myself. I got soft on myself on a really hard course. It was 100K up in Tahoe. And I knew it was a hard race, but I had already, like in the last calendar year, I had done a 200-mile race in Tahoe. I did a 100-mile race in Zion. I did a 50-mile race in Mount Hood. I did a trail marathon. I had done a 50K. Like I had done a lot of racing, and I'm like, oh, I got this. And I let a lot of little things slip going into that race. I didn't have backup plans. Like this one, I said I had a 24, 27, 30-hour plan. And I broke those plans down to the aid station. And I wrote them all down by hand. And I showed them to Lena. Like, these are my plans. And like, I knew exactly where I was all the time because I did not want to take a DNF. It's just, there was too much at stake because like I wanted to get this Western State qualifier. I told a lot of people I was doing this race. We built a whole family vacation around it. I'm like, I didn't come out here to not finish. They're going to have to drag me off this course. So yeah, I felt very well prepared until it got hard. And this is where it got hard.
Oh.
So I finished the first loop and then I go back up to the first aid station, which is now mile 59. And the aid station is called Blue Fly. Big long climb I talked about. And it's steep and I get to the top and now it's like 9:30, right? Headlamps on. Earlier in this stretch, I thought I missed a turn. So I started going, I went down a hill and I was like, I don't see any flags. Did I miss a turn? I went back up a hill, a quarter mile. I saw another runner coming down. I'm like, did you see a flag? I think I missed a flag. This is where I started to feel mentally fatigued because I was like, I'm missing something. And this other guy was like, oh shit, Nate, I don't know. Maybe we did. And I kind of freaked him out. So he went back up with me and we found the last flag and we went back down. He's like, no, here's one down here. So, it's now it's dusk. It's 8:00, 8:30. Put the headlamp on and get up to Blue Fly, mile 59. And now I'm tired. Like I'm starting to really feel it. Right. It's now I've been out there 15, 16 hours. And I did sit down here and there was an older guy who looked kind of grizzled. And I looked at him and I said, do you ever consider taking a nap? And he looked at me. He's like, no, it'll do more harm than good. Best thing you do is keep on moving. And you look like you're moving pretty well. Man, I'm sorry, I'm choking up a little bit here because that was really important for me to hear. That guy felt like a little bit of a, we talk about the hero's journey all the time. And there's these people that are your guides. And I was like, I'm like, have you done a lot of these? He's like, yeah, I've done like 9 or 10 of these. And I heard that from him and I'm like, he's right. I just got to keep moving. And the fact he told me that he's like, you look like you're moving pretty well. He might've been lying through his teeth. That's what I needed to hear. And I knew the next section that's now we come back to that sort of long downhill. And so he left the aid station and then a couple minutes later I left and then I saw him down the path. And I just started going. I just kept going that next stretch. I'm like, all right, he's right. I got to keep moving. So next stretch, did the 10 miles downhill. Next stretch, got to mile 75, Coyote Hollow. So now I'm in Coyote Hollow, mile 75. I can hear coyotes, which now I know why they call it Coyote Hollow. And it's like 1:30 in the morning. And on that stretch between East Fork, which is miles 68 and 75, it's a pretty boring kind of part of the trail. It's not very technical, mostly uphill, like with some flats you can kind of run. I got my trekking poles. Middle of the night, I'm out there by myself, and I'm walking, and I fell asleep while I was walking. That was wild. I actually nodded off. Like how like you nod off in like on an airplane, and your head picks back up, and you have that like little flash of a dream or like a weird image in your brain. That happened to me while I was freaking walking. I was like, maybe I should have taken a nap, but I was like, man, that is wild, man. So I kept going and the same thing happened. It happened to me 3 times, like, because of like the click clack of my trekking poles and the fact that there wasn't much to think about with the trail. It's just like my brain is probably like, dude, this is like, you're bored. It's like 18 hours now. It's time to sleep.
So you're no
so I got
music,
to Coyote Hollow.
right?
No music. Yeah. I don't do music. Yeah, so I got to Coyote Hollow. Go ahead.
I just want to go back to that too, where like right at that point where you were thinking about like, not quitting per se, but just like taking a proper break. Like that gentleman appeared and had the right thing to say to you at the right time, which pushed you to like go to the next stage with like a little bit more energy. Like I kind of want to just unpack that a little bit, because like I feel like we were talking about like even in our business where it's like, where's the momentum? And then you get that like big momentum push, and it's like, oh, this is what I've been pushing so hard to get. Like, oh, this is that sign. And then the rest of it just starts to flow again. Like I feel it's such an appropriate analogy of you just needed somebody to tell you, hey, you got this. Like it's fine.
You're doing fine, man. This is the way it is. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, man. That was really big for me. I wish I would have gotten his name just so I could go back and look, because a lot of times you get like first names, and I didn't even ask his first name, because then you go back and figure out from the race reports or find them on Strava or something. I really wish I could thank him, because that was really big. That was really big.
All right, so we're back in the Coyote Hollow, and there's coyotes.
Yeah, so Coyote Hollow, mile 75, 1:30 in the morning. I drank a bunch of Mountain Dew, and I carry Starbucks Via packets with me. And so I'd staved off caffeine. I used caffeine in the morning when I first woke up, but I hadn't used caffeine aside from the caffeine that's in my drink mix, but I didn't do like a heavy dose. So I was like, okay, now's the time. I'm going to reach deep. Drank coffee, drank a bunch of Mountain Dew, and then I had then the next stretch is the switchbacks and all through the hoodoos and all that stuff. And that stretch, now I left there at 1:30, and I got into the next aid station. It was close to 4:30, like 4:15. So now it's just like dead middle of the night. And this is where it got cold. Like it could have gotten colder. And fortunately I had the right gear, but I was wearing at this point 5 layers. I had like an long sleeve under layer, 2 running shirts, a second long sleeve shirt, and then like a windbreaker. And then my legs, I had running tights, and then I put on raincoat pants just to stay warm. So the first mile or so out of each aid station, I was cold, because like you stop moving and your body cools down, and it's cold outside. So then the next mile, you're just trying to get warmed up again. And so it was cold. It was just really cold. So I got into Red Canyon. That's mile, whatever that was, like 83, around 4:30 in the morning. And I knew I had this big Red Canyon loop that I was going to take me at least 2 hours, because it took me, an hour 50 the first time around. And this is where it was just like my brain was like, this is where I like really had to reach deep. I just kept telling myself, if I could just get to the next station, just keep moving. So I start off in the Red Canyon loop, and you just start climbing, and you just, at this point, there's only 100 people in this race. So at this point, it's just totally strung out. Like way off in the distance, you can see somebody else's headlamp, something like that. You're like, oh, great, I have to climb up there. That's awesome. But a couple times in this Red Canyon loop, the moon was full, and I just, like, a couple times I just sat for a second. One time I just sat and laid on the ground with my arms out. I was just like, oh man, I'm spent. And then I remembered something I heard from this guy, David Goggins, which is, whenever you think you're done, like done, you're only 40% done. I was like, okay, I know I'm not done for sure. I got more in the tank. So I just got to keep moving. And so this is that up, down section. And I was like, if I can just get back to Red Canyon, then the sun's going to start coming out around 5:30. I could turn my headlamp off. I'll see the sun. And then from there, if I can get out of Red Canyon by 7 o'clock, I got about 4 hours. I could still do 30 hours. This is the way I'm thinking about it at this point. It's 4:30 in the morning, but this is the way I'm thinking about it. So at 4:30 in the morning, I'm thinking about the next 7 hours. Like I only got 7 hours to go. I've been going 23 and a half hours. So I got to Red Canyon, texted my wife, said, look, this is about the time. And I was actually, like, the other thing I was a little worried about was just how long it was taking me. It's hard for her, right? She's running crew. She's taking care of my son. She's in the middle of nowhere. I told her, like, oh, I think I'll have a good race. I'll be done by 8 in the morning. And now I'm texting her. I'm like, well, hey, honey, I'm going to be a little late. And like the text message I got was, yay, we'll see you soon. I was like, it was like a sense of relief. I'm like, oh, she's not mad. I knew she wouldn't be, but I didn't want her to be worried.
More reassurance on the trail is always helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So we finished up the loop, and then I'm like, at this point, it's just like, it's almost like the last assault. I got, this one stretch is like 6 miles, and then I know there's these 2 big climbs to get to mile 99, and it's 3 miles downhill. So now I'm actually, okay, it's 13 and a half to get to the finish, but it's really only 10 to the top of the peak because the last 3 are downhill. So I'm like, I only got 10 miles to go. And I know the next 5 or 6 are, doable. So really I only have like 4 or 5 hard miles to go. Like, this is like what you're telling yourself. And so we got to the last stretch, and so now it's like the next morning. It's like 8:30, 9 in the morning. I'm in this last stretch, and all of a sudden I see all these runners running at me in this trail, because the next day they started a 50K race. So these runners are starting their 50K, running past me on the trail, and they're looking at me and they're like, like for most of them, it dawns on them like, oh, this is one of the 100-miler guys. He's been out here since yesterday morning at 5 in the morning. And so, to their credit, most of the runners like kind of yielded to me on the trail because there's a lot of single track, and they were very encouraging. Like, you got this, man. You're looking good, man. I'm like, you fucking liar.
I'll take it. But I'll take it.
I'll take it. Yeah. And then, of all things, I see a woman I know. She's running towards me. I'm like, is that you? And so she and I both paced a friend of ours at the 200 last year. And so I've stayed in touch with her on Facebook and stuff. And I'm like, Casey. She's like, oh, you look great. You got this. And I was like, I am suffering. She's like, no. You only got a mile and a half to the next aid station. You're doing great. So that was kind of cool. That lasted about 100 feet. So yeah, so then the final push, I just kept telling myself, one step ahead, don't stop, keep moving. And then we got to the top of the last peak, and I was like, okay, I got this now. Got to the top of the last peak and finished off. So I came across the line in 30 hours, 19 minutes, 59.9 seconds. So just under 30 hours and 20 minutes. Not that it matters at all, but for perspective, like I said, there was about 55 DNFs out of 108. About half the field didn't finish. The other half did. So I ended up coming in 23rd overall out of 108, which is, for me, it's pretty solid race. I mean, if I have a good race, I know I can usually finish in the top 20% or so. I think that comes to like 21%. But I told my wife when I finished, I was like, I think that might have been the hardest single event I've done, just because of everything, with the cold, the elevation, the length of time I was out there, like 30 hours. The other 100 I did was 24 and a half hours. So you're just out there longer, conditions, everything. It's probably the second. But it's definitely like top two or three. So now it's done.
Was
it
it
back home talking to you?
Relief to be done? Was it elation? Like, what was the first emotion done?
Yeah, it was more like relief, and in some ways it was like I got a little emotional after finishing. I was just glad to be done. Like, I'm glad that's done. Really, like, I knew I could do it. And I had usually when you go do these kinds of races, you just expect things to go wrong. There's kind of a rule of three. 3 things are going to happen out there that you're going to have to figure out and problem solve. Could be you run out of water, you get lost, something happens. I had nothing. I had a perfect race. Physically, I was fine. Everything was fine. I just had to keep moving. And there was a lot of satisfaction in that, knowing that I had prepared really well and that I had really pushed through what ended up being a really, really hard course. I was like, yep, did it. Done. Now it feels like an out-of-body experience.
You did have 3 things happen. You had the old gentleman who told you not to take a nap and gave you your initial push. You had all those other racers who were on their way and yielded to you and gave you that extra push of encouragement. And then you ran into Casey, who was also giving you that support.
Oh, yeah.
So those are your 3 things.
Well, I meant, yeah, what I meant was the 3 things usually go wrong.
No, I know.
Go wrong.
And it says it went right and you got pushed in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's good, man. Congratulations. I'm very proud of you. I know you've been preparing
Thanks,
for this.
Man.
That you got it done. You got it done, like, even when you were like, shit, I want to quit. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's just a lot of lessons, and just, it's, people talk about, starting a company and doing the startup thing. And I think like doing this, well, what was interesting, like the second loop, like I was thinking about this as well as a download afterwards. Like I knew what was coming, the second loop versus the first loop. You just like, oh, wow, this is really steep, or, oh, this is a nice downhill. Like I kind of knew the course from the elevation profile and reading the description. You don't really know it till you see it. And the second time around, you're like, oh, now I know what's there. You feel like, oh, this should probably be a little bit easier. But it actually is what makes the second loop was harder, not just because I had already gone the 50 miles, but in a lot of ways, it's like, even though you know what's coming, you have more factors and variables that I was dealing with. I was dealing with, just being in pain. I was dealing with lack of sleep. I was dealing with being slow. And so just because you know what's ahead doesn't make it any easier. My first loop was 13 hours. My second loop was 17 hours and 20 minutes.
Wow.
So that's a long freaking time to be out there, man. 17 hours just to do 50 miles. Like I'd run a 50 miler in just at 10 hours. Like I could probably do like a pretty modest 50 miler. I could do it in 9.5 hours. So like almost double the time. Like I've done a 50K in 5.5 hours. So just for context, that's 31 miles. So you just think about how slow it is, and it's just a nighttime thing and being out there on your own. It definitely felt like the loneliest road in America.
Have you thought about your next one?
I have. I think we're going to have to pick that up in part 2 because I got a call coming up here.
Me too. Well, congratulations again, man. Glad you made it through. Glad there's some lessons. And on to the next one. More momentum.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad it's over. And I want to thank you for holding down the fort and then some. It was really nice to not just take the time away to do the race, but then the next few days hanging out with my family and doing some hiking around Bryce Canyon and Zion. I never once had a crack of my laptop. A couple things on the phone, but just like really appreciate that, Stephen.
Sure.
You do a great job, and it's great having you as part of the team here.
Let's do it. Let's keep going. Let's get you to more races.
Getting me to more races. I don't know if my body can handle more races. I got this one. When the next race is the Tahoe 200, I'm going to do that one again. I did it 2 years ago. Made it off the wait list. So it was just weird to say. Like, there's that many people who want to do a 200-mile race. There's a wait list. So my name just cleared a couple of weeks ago. So I'll be doing that in September. That's the next big one. And so that one I did in 82 hours and 14 seconds last time. And goal time this time around, I'm going to see if I can do it in 72. I'm going to see if I can knock 10 hours off. If I do that, that'll be pretty massive. But I'll take a few weeks off and start gearing up again in June.
Wow. All right.
All right, man.
That's my
Talk
call.
to you soon.
Talk to you.
All right. See you, man. Bye.
Hey, so Scott here. Listen, so you just listened to a conversation with Stephen and me. And what I'm doing here is really just a postscript to that conversation. So Steve and I went on for a bit, and both of us had kind of a hard stop, as you heard, with the episode that we were just recording. We had client stuff to do. That's first and foremost the most important thing that we do here. That's our number one value here with our company is clients first. And so it was just time to go, and it was time to go. But there were, some additional lessons learned that I had prepared that I wanted to share. And so in this postscript, it's actually the next morning. It's now Saturday morning. I just back from doing a little bit of a run myself and was replaying the conversation that Stephen and I had and thinking about some of the notes that I prepared. And I feel like it's frankly just too important of a topic and an issue for a lot of us when we think about running a startup. Just the word of running. If you think about it, like running a startup, you feel like you're constantly running. And sometimes that running is a sprint all the time. And those sprints get tiring. And you get to the end of a sprint, whether it's a product sprint or engineering sprint or a sales sprint, and end of 2 weeks, end of 4 weeks, end of 4 months. And for many of you listening, it's the end of 4 years of sprinting, running. And it's really hard. And there are times where you need to take a break and think about what am I doing here and why am I doing it? And what are some of the lessons that we can translate from the world of ultra running that I step into a couple times a year when I do these long races? And how can we translate some of that learning into some lessons that you might take back with you. So I've got a couple more notes here that I have that I kind of typed out in Evernote prior to Stephen and I chatting, and a couple of things that I wanted to additional lessons learned that I want to extend with this particular podcast episode. So number one, in no particular order, and some of the things we talked about. So I'll try not to repeat some of the things that Steve and I talked about. But a couple of the things, like as it relates to the course, we talked a little bit about, this particular race is a 2-loop course, 50 miles each. And, you get to the start of the course and you're excited, right? You're excited because you put in all this work, you put in all this preparation, done everything you can to get to the starting line. And for many of us, when we're starting our company, it wasn't, it's for most of us, we oftentimes have an idea, and that idea starts, years before we can even begin the company in a more formal sense. You find a problem, you establish an idea, or you think you have an idea for solving a problem, and you want to make an impact. And it takes, for many of us, years to get from that idea that's germinating in our mind about solving a problem to the point where we can actually start the company. I know for me, starting this company, I was doing part-time coaching and workshops and kind of sales consulting work on the side for nearly 4 years before I can even get to a point where I could, in a lot of ways, start this edition of the company, if you will. So it's been 3.5 years where I've had this work be my full-time life's work. But it took me 3.5, 4 years, maybe even 5 if I think about it, just to get to that starting line. And so you get to that point and you start excited. But very, very quickly, you cross over the starting line and you get going on that course, and the reality sets in. And for me in that race, the reality was in the first couple of miles, you start to realize like, okay, great, I've done 2 miles, but I got 98 more to go. And the fun and the excitement and everything that you've built up in your mind about starting this company and getting going and making the impact that you want to make, you realize like, man, this is going to be a pretty freaking long journey. And so it's really difficult sometimes to continue moving forward with excitement. And we talked about this in a previous episode, the difference between motivation and discipline. And that's, in a lot of sense, the races that I do, it's, when I'm out there on the course and I think about that, it's like you have to find, and sometimes you do have to motivate yourself. And there's these little short-term, boosts that you get. It might be from an aid station worker that tells you like, hey, great job, you're doing great. Or it could be from another runner who tells you you're looking strong. Or it could be that you finally come over to the top of a little hill and you realize like, oh man, this is great. I got 2 miles of downhill here. Or the course is a little bit easier in the section than I thought it was going to be. And those are motivating because it's like, it's a bonus. It feels like, oh, wow, this is great. This is something that's going to give me a little pop here. But at the end of the day, right, the course is the course, right? It's 100 miles. And in some cases, it's, the startup is not even 100 miles. It's 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles or 100,000 miles to go from where you start to where you want to go. And that's the idea that you start excited is great. But the more important is just the discipline to keep going when you have to keep going. So there's going to be these painful moments. Like I talked about with Stephen, you get to mile 35, 37, 40, and you're like, what exactly am I doing here? Why am I out here? Why am I doing this? And you have those moments all the time when you're doing your startup, when you're running your company, whether you're at, day 6 or month 6 or year 6, there's always those moments of doubt that creep into your mind. Like, what else could I be doing? Man, I could just pack it in when I get to mile 50. And at mile 50, just decide that, hey, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm good. And I'm just going to call it a day from here. Right. But in order to really make the impact that you want to make, and in my case, to really hit the finish line, to get to 100 miles, that it's more than just excitement at the starting line. It's just keeping this idea of discipline and keeping yourself moving forward. And that's, the second thing I wrote down here is that even when you know what's ahead, it's much, much tougher than you think, because, they give you a course map, they give you an elevation profile. I did the first loop and I know all of the climbs that are ahead. And in a lot of ways, it's great to have a 2-loop course because you know exactly what's coming. And in a lot of ways, it's really tough to have a 2-loop course because you know exactly what is coming. And so when you're out there doing your race, in your case, your race is your startup, after a couple of months and certainly after a couple of years, you start to get a sense of patterns. You start to get a sense of what is the course here. Like after you get those first few customers, after you get that first $1 million in revenue, you start to realize like, okay, so this is really what it's going to take for us to get the next deal. This is what it's really going to take for us to be successful. Or, okay, we hired one salesperson and that person didn't work. And we hired a second salesperson and we realized like, wow, in order to make our salespeople successful, we really, really have to be sure and get a sense for what we're doing. And so in that sense, it's really tough because you know how hard it's going to be. So just because you know the course, it doesn't make it any easier. So that was the second. So just kind of counting off a couple of lessons learned that I wanted to translate and make you feel like, and I think really there is some good translation here between the running that I do and startup life. So one is you start excited. Two, even when you know it's ahead, it's much, much tougher than you think. Number 3 that I wrote down here is find the beauty. And so I mentioned a couple times like the course itself. And when you're out there doing your thing, like you're out there on your course, you're doing your startup, and you're out there in your wilderness trying to find customers, trying to build product, trying to figure out how to keep customers happy, trying to figure out what is the pricing model that we're going to use, trying to figure out how do we hire, how do we recruit, hire, and onboard and a team around us. In all of that work and all of that wilderness, it's really hard to take a moment and just find the beauty in what's happening. And I think that's where celebrating small success and celebrate even big success, because finding that first customer, getting to $1 million in revenue, hiring that great salesperson, that great engineer, whatever that is, making those hard decisions. Maybe the beauty is shedding a co-founder that just isn't on board with where the company is going. There's a lot of times, many of the conversations that I have with our clients is around team issues, team challenges, whether it's a co-founder or a contributor. Say like, this person just isn't working out. What am I supposed to do? And you have to make hard decisions. You have to have hard conversations. And while those things are difficult and you're out there in the wilderness figuring this stuff out, I think it's so critical to take a moment and find the beauty in that, because we know this is going to be hard. We know there's going to be obstacles. We know that there's going to be challenges ahead of us as we're running the company. And so to look at those moments and say, okay, this is going to be a really hard conversation with my co-founder. This is going to be a really hard conversation with this contributor who's been with us for 18 months and did some fabulous things to get us to this point, but it's not the right person who's going to get us to the next checkpoint in our company's course, in our company's growth. There is a certain beauty in that, to be able to see those things, to see those moments, to come to the realization that this is a decision that needs to be made. It's here in front of us. And while it's really hard, I think it's important to look at that and look at it in a positive way and say, this is going to help us move forward. We owe it to the company. We owe it to the business. The business needs us to make these decisions, right? And I do feel like, and I know myself running this company, when I've had to make hard decisions and I've had to have hard conversations and I've had to let people go, there is a certain beauty in it. And so even the ugly stuff that happens can be beautiful if we let it. And separately, I think the good things are obviously beautiful. And I think it's important to find the beauty in that as well. To say, man, take that moment and take a step out of like when you get that contract signed and you receive that payment and that big new customer with a huge logo has said to you like, wow, this is going great. We're so happy that we made this decision. There's beauty in that. There's beauty in the journey all along the way. And I think as leaders of our company, it's so important for us to take a moment and just pause and have the team around us say, this is wonderful. This is really great that this is happening to us. And here's why. So that was number 3 is find the beauty. So a couple of other points that I wanted to make. I'm just going to skip down and just kind of scrolling through my Evernote file here. Something else I wrote here was trust your training. Once you build the engine and keep it fueled, you can just keep going. Even if you're not going as fast as you planned, you're still moving forward. And so this is something I tell myself both before a race and during a race, is to just trust your training. Trust that you've put in the time. If you've truly put in the time and you've truly put in the effort to get to the point that you're at, then a lot of it is just a matter of keeping going. Just keep going forward. Just keep moving. And most times, we're not going to go as fast as we want to. A lot of us build spreadsheets and models because we have to with investors, and we have to try to assemble some semblance of a comp plan for our team and for our company. But at the end of the day, we often don't go as fast as we plan. The important thing is that we just keep moving forward. And in those moments of doubt and in those moments of questioning, and you ask yourself, are we doing the right thing? Are we sure we're on the right path? Are we sure that this is really what we want to do? I think that's where you do have to trust your training. You have to trust that you didn't do the best that you could to get to this point. And it was, I think a lot of times, like once that engine is built, once you get the company going, then it starts to take on a life of its own. It starts to take on inertia of its own. And I think it's really important to trust the work that you've put in and trust the team around you to say, okay, even if we're in a hard spot here, and even if things aren't going as fast as we want, if we could just keep going, if we just get to tomorrow, if we could just get to next week, if we just get to next quarter and force ourselves to keep going, then oftentimes just surviving the tough stretches will, one, make you stronger, and two, will open up the next opportunity that you have. So, if for me in the race, if I'm doing a long climb and it's really hard and it really sucks because my quads are burning and my breath is a little short, then it's just saying to myself, look, I know I can take another step, or I can look just ahead on the path and see a tree that's overhanging the trail that's 50 yards down the trail and just say, okay, I'll just get to that tree. If I can just get to that tree, then I'll figure the next little spot to get to. And then I'll get to that tree and look ahead 100 yards and see a big boulder. Say, okay, cool. I'm going to walk to that boulder. I know I can get to that boulder. And so just trusting myself and trusting my body and trusting the training that I can just sort of get to those next spots. Because eventually if I keep hitting these little spots and I keep trusting my body and trusting my training to get to those little spots, then I will get to a point where there will be a downhill. There will be some relief. I will get rewarded for the effort that I put in. So that brings me to the next point I wanted to make, which is, much of this is a mind game with ourselves, with our team, with our market, with our customers. It's a mindset game. And once you've got your core product built, even if it doesn't have everything that you want it to have, it's never going to have everything that you want it to have. There's always more features. There's always more integrations. There's always more work that can be done to the product. Once you've got the core product built and it solves a problem, once you've got the core team built and they're rallying around the mission, the vision, and the values of the company, once you've got time and space with a potential prospective customer, then it's just a mind game to say with confidence, we have this product and we know it solves your problem and we can help you solve this problem. And when we do that and when we implement, you're going to get this benefit. You're going to get this payoff. Therefore, this is the price that we're going to charge. I had a call yesterday afternoon with a new client who's rolling out their first version of their product, and it's very, I would say, for lack of a better term, bare bones. And in a lot of ways, they actually need their first couple of customers to help them figure out what the product is going to look like. And the conversation we had was, well, if we could get a couple of, like say 1 to 3 customers in the next 3 to 6 months that could do a 3-month proof of concept or a 3-month pilot with us, then that would be a huge step forward from a product development standpoint, because implementing with those customers are going to help us figure out exactly what the product needs to do. And the conversation that we had around that was, well, gosh, like a 3-month POC, 3-month proof of concept. Do you think, they're asking me, Scott, do you think that customers would be willing to engage for that long of a period of time for a proof of concept? And so the mindset there from their standpoint was like, wow, 3 months, like it feels like we're asking a lot, and we want them to pay for this proof of concept. Not a lot of money, maybe, $20,000, $30,000 for this proof of concept. Gosh, it's like we're asking them for money, and we're asking them for 3 months of their time, and like maybe they haven't budgeted for this. And is that okay? And my response to them was, like, it's just a mindset thing to say, look, God, like if I'm in front of the prospect and say, look, guys, you've got this problem. That's why we're having this conversation. You don't have this thing solved. You don't have visibility about that part of your business problem. I can get into specifics about the business or anything like that, but I think all of us listening can probably relate to the situation. And you say, look, you've got this problem, and this problem is a multi-million-dollar problem. It's a $10 million problem. It's potentially a $50 or $100 million problem. Right now, you're not solving it. You don't have, it doesn't appear that there are any other best alternatives. So we can get you on the path to solving this problem. And all we need from you is 10 weeks. All we need from you is 3 months to run a proof of concept. And in that proof of concept, we're going to do this and this and this. And after 10 weeks, after 12 weeks, you're going to get this and this and this. And all that requires is a small investment of $25,000. So at an absolute minimum, even if you choose not to move forward after the proof of concept, you're still going to get a huge amount of value, because we're going to get you visibility around this problem. We're going to help you construct your data and get you visibility around what's going on with this problem. So if you're going to call McKinsey as a consultant to come do this for you, they're going to charge you $250,000 and take 6 months or a year to get you the same thing. We're going to get you the outcome, that short-term outcome, in just 3 months' time for only $25K. So it's the exact same offering, but the mindset is different. And that's where having the confidence to say, no, like as a company, as a startup, we have this problem that we're solving, and we know we can solve it with our product. Even if we can't solve the entire problem, we know we can get people on the path to doing something about the problem that they have. And that's where, like, much of what we're doing, once you get things rolling, once you get the engine built, and this is translating it back to the trail running, it's just a mind game. It's saying, I can do this. I will do this. And so for me, it's getting to the next aid station. It's getting to the top of the next climb. It's just knocking out, looking at my Garmin and saying, okay, I'm at 34 miles now. Once I hit 40, that's going to be a big moment, because I'm going to see a 4.0 instead of a 3 something in front of me. Or once I get to the turnaround, I know I'm halfway done and I've only got 50 miles left. It sounds crazy to say that. Those are the mind games that you have to play with yourself. That's the mindset you have to have. And so much of what we're doing out there as startups is confidence. It is a mind game. You started the company with an idea to solve a problem. You want to make an impact in your industry. You want to make an impact in your market. You want to make an impact in the world for many of us. And so we have to be confident enough in what we're doing and trust the work we put in and trust the training that we're doing and believe that what we're doing is going to work. And so much of what we're doing out there is you're on your, when you're on your 100-miler, your 1,000-miler, or in your startup, much of it is a mind game. So I'm just scanning again through my Evernote file. A couple last things I wanted to mention is, and I talked a bit about this with Steven about having a race plan. Like, you do the planning, the planning is more important than the plan. Like, yes, you have to build a plan, but the planning, the process of figuring out, okay, this is what we need to do in the next 100 days. I mean, that's the way we think about it with our clients, is what's the 100-day sales plan look like? And we're going to build that plan. We're doing that right now this time of year. We do this in January through April, and then we do another 100 days from May through August, and then we do the last 100 days from September through end of the year. And one of the things that a lot of our clients say is like, well, I don't know exactly. What if the plan changes? And my response is, well, of course the plan is going to change. The important part is doing the planning. We need to start with a plan, because then we can figure out where we have to deviate, where we have to calibrate. Are we on course? Are we off course? Is there a reason to go off course? Or is that tangent off to the right, is that just going to be a dead end somewhere? Because if we don't do the plan and figure out where we want to go, we don't have the ability to ask those kinds of questions of ourselves along the way. And so for me, doing the race plan, I did 3 different plans: a 24-hour, 27-hour, 30-hour plan. And, after a third of the course, half of the course, well, less than half the course, I knew the 24-hour plan was out the window. Now I'm left with the 27 and 30-hour plan. But I had these alternatives in my mind, and I knew what the options were. And even after I knew the 27-hour plan was done and I was left with my 30-hour plan, I also knew at about mile 75 or so, maybe mile 80, like even the 30-hour plan was going to be in question. It could easily be a 33-hour plan if it's going to take me that long. We had 36 hours total for cutoff to finish this race. I knew I was going to make that, save for getting injured or something like that. But having done the plan allowed me to make deviations, allowed me to make some changes along the way. And so that's where I feel like, as a startup, a lot of times it's easy to get sucked into day-to-day, week-to-week, grind, sprint, without taking a few moments to do the planning. Say, okay, like what is our true north? And even if we do have to make a decision to make a change and go off course for a good reason, when you get to those junctures, you can then ask yourself, does this make sense or not? As opposed to just getting to a juncture and not knowing whether to go left or right. If you haven't done the plan, then you get to the juncture and you just, okay, I guess I'll go right here, or I guess I'll go left here. But if you instead have done the plan and the plan says, well, at this juncture, we're supposed to go left, but you get to the juncture and you realize like, man, I'm going a little slower than I planned, or, this is a good opportunity for us to make a change on how things are going. We got invited to come speak at a conference we didn't expect, or we got we had an inbound lead from a huge Fortune 500 company we weren't expecting to be able to work with this soon in our startup's life. But they want us to make some alterations to the product roadmap. Okay, well, now we have a decision to make. But if we haven't made the plan in the first place to say where we're going to go, in the sales world, it could be the next 100 days, or in the startup world over the next 6 months, then we're not going to know when and how to ask the questions as to whether or not we're on the right course, or what changes we need to make in order to stay on course if we're going faster or slower than expected. So I'm so adamant about doing the planning, even if the plan doesn't matter. I mean, I do this every day for myself. I wake up every morning and do morning pages. That's a version of doing my daily planning. I sit down and think about the day that's ahead and what do I need to do. And oftentimes the day doesn't go the way I expect, but at least I've started the day thinking about where it needs to go. And I have the ability to make the decision if something new pops up. And sometimes that's a decision not to take an opportunity that's in front of me, or not to spend time on something that might be out of bounds from what I had done on the plan. So I think I've belabored the point here enough, is that you just need to you have to build the plan. You have to do the planning so that you know what your options are going to be and how to think about and how to ask the right questions about the options that are going to come available to you as a startup. And the last thing I wrote here, and maybe in a lot of ways, well, maybe not maybe, I think in thinking in a moment here, well, let me just share what the principle is, and then I'll talk about why I'm pausing. I wrote, you have to have a support crew that really, really supports you in every way. Because for me, one of the biggest mental challenges in these races is knowing what I'm asking of my wife. She's running point as support team captain. She's the one that's handling all the daily duties of being a mom. She's the one that has to worry about me when I'm out in the trail. And while she knows I'm going to be safe as possible, and while she knows I'm going to make the right decisions whenever possible, you're out there. in the wilderness. And, there are cliffs and people trip. And sometimes your body doesn't function the way that you want it to function. Something can happen to me. When I did the Tahoe 200 out in Lake Tahoe, there are bears, and it's pretty rare that there are bear attacks or anything like that. There are freaking bears out there at 2:00 in the morning with mama bear and her cubs. Like, anything can happen while you're out there. So that's a lot to ask of her. And then even after I finish, I've gone 100 miles and I've skipped a night of sleep. Not to just skip the night of sleep like being awake. I've skipped a night of sleep going 100 miles. So I'm not exactly a fully functional human being when I cross the finish line, right? So the longer out that I'm out there, the greater the burden. And, I thought I was going to be done by 8:00 in the morning. That's a 27-hour plan. And by nightfall, I knew I was heading for this 30-hour plan, which meant 11:00 at the finish line, which is now you're getting into like not just the whole first day on Friday, 5 a.m. start, running through the day, seeing her at 6 in the afternoon at the halfway point. Now I'm running through the night. She's got to think about that and then wake up the next day and do the mom thing all over again and think about me. And now I'm texting her and saying, oh, yeah, it's going to be like 11:00. And what if it turns out to be later than 11? Now it's 2:00. And the longer I'm out there, the less functional I'm going to be as a human when I get back. And I was really worried about, like, how is she going to respond to me taking this long to finish this race? And what is her mindset about this whole thing? And so I texted her at 6:00 in the morning, 6:06 a.m. I've got it in my phone, to tell her at that point, like, look, I'm on the 11:00 plan. I'm on the 30-hour plan. And I was kind of worried. Like, I was worried that she might say, well, look, are you sure you want to keep going? Or are you sure you're okay? I was worried that she would have some doubts about whether or not I should keep going because, frankly, like, I'm way behind schedule. And her reply to me was, yay, see you soon, smiley face. And I got that text message back and I was like, wow, that is so good. Because I was worried that she was worried and it was all for no reason. And when I finally crossed the finish line and got my bearings and sort of like, okay, I'm finished, the first thing she suggested was like, listen, why don't you go take a shower in the RV, get a nap. I've got this. Benjamin's having a great time. He's playing with other kids whose parents are out there doing this thing. Like, it's all good. And we both support each other in the same way. She's a PhD that does consulting work. She's a postdoc at UC Davis, and she's a private pilot. She's a certified flight instructor, and she teaches people to fly airplanes. And like, I supported her through her PhD. I supported her through getting her pilot licenses. And that for her it's the same as me being out on the trail. Lots of hours that she had to go take lessons, lots of studying that she had to do, lots of preparation for check rides that she had to do. And while, yeah, there's some stuff it's like, man, okay, it's Saturday afternoon and you've got a flight lesson or you've got to go teach somebody. I'd rather be spending time with you. I also know that this is the thing she really, really loves to do, just like I really, really love to do these races. And so at the end of the day, when you're running your startup, I think it's probably, at least for me, like, I couldn't do this with a clear conscience if I didn't know I had the full love and support of the most important person in my life, which is my wife. And I think that's really, really important that, for any entrepreneur, to make sure that your team out there supports you, whether it's a partner, a spouse, parents, family, friends. Find those people that are going to support you and help you along the way, because it is lonely and it is tough and it is hard. Like, every step along the way is hard, and it's not just the race for me. It's all of the training that has to go into it. And so the biggest lesson, I guess, at the end here is just make sure you have that support crew around you that supports you in every way, because you're going to need those people to be successful. I can't do these races without her help and her support. And you can't run your company without the love and the help and the support of people around you. So those are my postscript thoughts here after the conversation with Steven. Like I said, it's the next morning. It's Saturday. I'm just going to be wrapping up here in just a second. Yeah, I know it's a bit of a longer episode. I mean, these races mean a lot to me personally, and as much as I can, I like to, and I want to pull those lessons back that I've learned and bring those to you, because I want you to know that I've mentioned this in a previous episode. You're not alone out there. As you're out there on this journey, as you're out there on your course, doing your 100-miler with your company, it's hard. But I think that if you have the right structure around you, if you think about the course, if you think about and find the beauty and just keep going, and having the right team and trusting your training and having the right mindset, all of those things are just little tools in the toolkit that when you put those all together, it gives you what you need to be successful, to take your idea and turn it into the impact that you want to make. So that's it for now. It's time for me to get rolling here. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Startup Selling Show. If you made it all the way to this point of the show, then it tells me you're probably digging the content here, as I like to say. And one of the things I would love, actually two things I would love for you to do is, one, if you would leave a review on iTunes or Spotify or SoundCloud or Stitcher, wherever you're listening to this podcast, please do leave a review. It helps those platforms suggest our podcast to other people just like you. And that's one of the best ways for us to continue to expand the number of people that we're reaching with this podcast. And secondly, I would love for you to tell a friend or 10 about the podcast. If you know a fellow startup founder, if you know somebody who runs a startup or works at a startup that you think could benefit from what we're sharing here on the Startup Selling Show, I would love for you to tell them about this. Have them listen to a couple of episodes, because viral is still the best way for us to get the word out about the podcast. So we don't do ads. We don't try to promote this too much, other than doing blog posts that we post on LinkedIn and some other places. So viral still is the best way for us to get the word out. And I would really, really appreciate it if you could just text somebody right now, maybe send an email to a couple of friends and say, hey, listen, I've been listening to the show, the Startup Selling Show. It's really great. I think you should check out a couple of episodes. If you just do that, that would be really great. So that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening. Bringing a couple of guests episodes to you in the next few weeks. We've already got them lined up. I'm really excited about some of the guests. I think you will be too. So keep an eye out for those new episodes coming out into the next few weeks, the next few months. Okay, that's it for now. Have an awesome day. See ya.